Do you ever see a car that looks like it could rip the asphalt off the street, only to find out it drives like a soggy toaster? Welcome to 1970, the year muscle cars peaked in style but started slipping under the hood. The chrome was flawless, the hood scoops were menacing, and the paint jobs? Absolute eye candy. But pop the hood or take one for a spin and reality set in fast. Some of these cars couldn't back up the attitude. Whether it was because of weight, marketing confusion, or performance that just didn't live up to the hype, these muscle cars all shared one thing. They looked awesome and flopped hard. So today we're counting down the top 5 awesome-looking 1970 muscle cars that totally flopped. And by the end, you might be asking yourself how something that looked this good could go so wrong. Top 5. 1970 Dodge Challenger SE383. You walk into a Dodge dealership in early 1970. Parked front and center is a brand new Challenger. Long hood, short deck, Coke bottle curves. It's dressed to kill. Deep purple paint, white vinyl top, rally wheels, and just enough chrome to catch the morning sun. And the badge on this one? SE383. This is it, you think? The car that's going to shut the door on Mustangs and Camaros. Dodge's long-awaited entry into the pony car war. A fresh fighter with vintage muscle DNA. Ready to go toe-to-toe with the Boss 302, the Z/28, and anything else Detroit had to offer. Everything about it screams potential. The leather bucket seats, the wood grain dash, the formal roofline with that tiny, almost cinematic rear window that looks like it was borrowed from a James Bond getaway car. You imagine yourself rolling down Main Street grinning, gunning, and getting respect at every stoplight. People turning their heads, kids pointing, cops looking twice. You're about to sign the papers until you actually drive it. Let's rewind for a moment. The 1970 Dodge Challenger was built on Chrysler's new E-body platform. A close cousin to the Plymouth Barracuda, but with a longer wheelbase and more upmarket intent. This wasn't just a muscle car, it was Dodge's muscle car, and it had to make a big splash. After sitting on the sidelines while Ford, Chevy, and Pontiac dominated the pony car game, Dodge was finally ready to rumble. And rumble it did, if you picked the right version. Dodge offered an astonishing range of trims and engines. You could get anything from a 225 cubic inch slant 6 all the way up to the fire-breathing 426 Hemi. There were rally editions, drag strip specials, and even a race-inspired T/A model designed to qualify for SCCA Trans Am racing. But the SE Special Edition was a different animal altogether. This wasn't built for the track, it was built for status. The SE trim was Dodge's attempt to civilize the muscle car. It featured upscale interior materials, a vinyl roof, bright trim, and a unique rear window treatment that gave it a luxury coupe vibe. It looked classy, respectable. A muscle car in a tuxedo. And under the hood, the 383 Magnum V8, rated at 335 horsepower, seemed like the perfect match. Enough muscle to back up the look, but not so much that you'd scare off the casual buyer. On paper, it was a brilliant balance of brawn and refinement, muscle plus maturity. But specs don't always tell the full story. Once you hit the road, the cracks begin to show, and fast. That 383? Torquey, no doubt, but saddled with the SE's added weight, it felt lazy. Like a linebacker wearing a tuxedo. Still strong, but not built to move quickly. The SE's luxury features came at a cost. More sound insulation, thicker carpet, extra trim, heavier side glass, and that sleek opera-style rear window, it required structural reinforcement, adding even more pounds. The result? The engine had to work overtime just to keep up. Off-the-line acceleration was underwhelming. It didn't punch. It pushed, and it wasn't just the weight. The suspension tuning on the SE was noticeably softer than its performance-focused siblings. The ride was smooth, sure, but vague. Overboosted power steering made it feel disconnected from the road. Throttle response was muted, as if filtered through molasses. Even the brakes, though adequate, lacked the bite you'd expect in something wearing a Magnum badge. To make matters worse, the SE383 was often optioned with automatic transmissions and high gear ratios optimized for cruising, not racing. So even if the engine had the lungs, the gearing choked it out before it could roar. You didn't feel like a street brawler behind the wheel. You felt like a guy borrowing his dad's car and hoping no one noticed. Buyers who wanted luxury bought a Charger. Enthusiasts who wanted speed went for the R/T or T/A. The SE383 was stuck in the middle, trying to be both and ending up as neither. And the market noticed. The SE383 wasn't a failure exactly, but it wasn't a hit either. It was a compromise. A stylish shell without the spirit to match. While the Challenger name would go on to become a legend, immortalized in films like Vanishing Point, and reborn decades later as a modern muscle icon, the SE383 version quietly faded into the background. A forgotten middle child in a family of icon. A handsome face with no fight behind it. But if you thought the SE underdelivered, wait until you see what Pontiac did with a car that looked even faster and somehow flopped even harder. Top 4. 1970 Pontiac Firebird Esprit. You see it from across the lot. Low, lean, aggressive. A split front grille. A fastback silhouette that looks like it's slicing through the air even while standing still. A wide track stance that screams stability and power. You take a step closer, and for a second, you swear it's a Trans Am. Your heart jumps. Maybe it's your lucky day. Maybe this is your shot at owning a Pontiac Street Warrior without the inflated insurance rates and flashy stickers, but then you see the badge. Not Trans Am. Not Formula 400. It says Esprit. Still, your eyes can't believe it. It looks like the real deal. Bold lines, sporty trim, dual exhaust tips poking out beneath the bumper. Surely it's a sleeper, right? A wolf in disguise? A muscle-bound underdog? You're hopeful, excited, but what happens next feels less like a surprise and more like a betrayal. Let's rewind and look at what this car really was. The 1970 Firebird wasn't just a minor update, it was a ground-up redesign. Pontiac's second-generation take on the pony car world. It was longer, lower, wider, almost exotic in profile, with curves that leaned more Italian Grand Tourer than Detroit Bruiser. Even the base model turned heads. But the Esprit? That was supposed to be the stylish step-up. It wasn't built to dominate stoplight drag races. It was built to turn heads at the country club. Pontiac positioned the Esprit as the personal luxury trim, a more refined take on the muscle car idea. It came with color-keyed mirrors, upgraded interior materials, deluxe carpeting, wood grain accents on the dash, and additional chrome flourishes. You could even get it with hidden windshield wipers, Rally 2 wheels, and a sporty-looking rear spoiler, visual cues that whispered performance to anyone passing by. And under the hood, a 350 cubic inch V8 came standard. That sounded promising. After all, 350 cubes was more than enough to make a muscle car out of a Nova or a Chevelle. Add that to the Firebird's sleek lines, and it's no wonder many shoppers mistook the Esprit for a performance sleeper. A Trans Am without the insurance penalty. The moment you twist the key and drop the shifter into drive, the magic starts to crumble. That 350 V8? It made just 255 horsepower on a good day. And the majority of Esprits came with an automatic transmission and highway gears, typically in the high 2XX range. Translation? Off-the-line performance was anything but thrilling. The car didn't launch. It glided. It didn't growl. It hummed. The suspension, tuned for comfort, soaked up bumps like a Cadillac, but left the car floating through corners. The power steering was so overboosted it felt disconnected. The exhaust note, muffled to the point of being nearly silent. There was more muscle in the brochure than there was in the car itself. In reality, the Esprit wasn't built to fight. It was built to cruise. That's the thing, Pontiac never intended the Esprit to be a performance car. It was a style package, a luxury statement for those who wanted the appearance of speed without the hassle. This was Pontiac's answer to the Mustang Grande. More decor, less detour. But here's the problem. Buyers didn't always read the fine print. To the casual eye, and even to some dealers, it looked like a performance model. It had the same body as the Trans Am, the same silhouette. Some buyers convinced themselves it was close enough. Maybe they'd bolt on a new air cleaner or swap the rear gears later. Instead, what they got was a boulevard cruiser with a muscle car costume. And that mismatch created a quiet but dangerous problem for Pontiac. Disappointment. Not the kind you write angry letters about. The kind that eats away at a brand's promise. The kind that makes people think twice the next time Pontiac promises performance. The 1970 Firebird Esprit wasn't a bad car. In many ways, it was a well-designed, well-equipped coupe for those who valued style over speed. But it existed in a segment obsessed with quarter-mile times and street cred. And in that world, the Esprit was a misfit, a misunderstood middle child that never quite fit in. It wore the face of a warrior, but carried the heart of a diplomat. And that confusion didn't just cost sales, it cost trust. Buyers left showrooms feeling duped, and Pontiac learned that in the muscle car market, looks alone aren't enough. But if you think the Esprit was guilty of misleading looks, wait until you see what Dodge did next. The next car looked like a NASCAR Dominator, complete with arrow nose and giant rear wing, but couldn't even win over dealerships, let alone buyers. Top 3. 1970 Mercury Cyclone spoiler. It had the name, the nose, and the NASCAR flair. Cyclone spoiler. Car that looked like a thunderclap on wheels. When you saw it in 1970, you didn't walk past it. You stared. Long and hard. Because this wasn't just a muscle car. It was a statement. It didn't just wear speed, it shouted it like a rock star with a megaphone. The front end looked like it was designed in a wind tunnel. The back capped off with a wing that wouldn't be out of place at Talladega. Everything about the Cyclone spoiler said it was built for one thing: war on wheels. Mercury wasn't just trying to cash in on the muscle car craze. With the Cyclone spoiler, they were swinging for the fences, trying to bring their NASCAR pedigree to the pavement. This was more than just another mid-size coupe with a big engine. This was Mercury's missile, built to look like the cars David Pearson was wheeling to victory on the superspeedways. And under the hood, the Ram Air 429 Cobra Jet V8, a monster engine with a deep, feral roar and pavement-twisting torque. It featured a functional hood scoop that channeled air directly into the beast. Hidden headlights gave it a sleek, clean face. The arrow nose was a direct callback to Mercury's wind-cheating race cars. The spoiler name wasn't a gimmick. It was a nod to the car's role in spoiling the fun for Ford's rivals on the track. Color options weren't subtle either. Competition orange, bright yellow, grabber blue. This car didn't try to blend in. It wore its racing heritage like war paint. Dual racing mirrors, rally stripes, a rear deck spoiler that seemed to dare anyone behind it to try and catch up. This car was supposed to be a dream come true for speed freaks. A street-legal NASCAR experience. No roll cage, no pit crew required. And it should have been unstoppable. But here's the part Mercury didn't advertise. It was huge. The 1970 Cyclone spoiler tipped the scales at nearly 4,000 pounds. That's Chevelle SS 454 territory, and not in a good way. It was longer than a Charger, wider than a Roadrunner, and with all that mass, the car's handling felt more like a full-size Lincoln than a lean track weapon. That 429 Cobra Jet V8, sure, it was powerful. On paper, it made 370 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque, but it was dragging a battleship. Acceleration was strong in a straight line, but try taking a tight corner and it would remind you, with plenty of tire squeal, that this wasn't a lightweight pony car. The steering was vague, the suspension was soft, and while the engine wanted to scream, the car itself felt more like it wanted a nap. Even the interior sent mixed signals. Bucket seats and a sporty dash suggested performance. But the layout was bloated, the materials more luxury-oriented. It felt like Mercury couldn't decide. Was this a gentleman's rocket ship? Or a lounge on wheels? Then came the market confusion. Traditional Mercury buyers weren't interested. They wanted quiet comfort, not screaming big blocks and flashy stripes. Meanwhile, younger gearheads, the kind drooling over Roadrunners, Camaros, and Mach 1S, weren't even thinking about Mercury. The brand didn't have the street cred. The name Cyclone spoiler sounded awesome, but to many, it just wasn't cool enough. Worse yet, it wasn't cheap. And at that price, buyers who wanted pure muscle were looking elsewhere. At cars with bigger followings, more aggressive reputations, and lighter curb weights. In a year where muscle cars still dominated sales, the Cyclone spoiler fizzled. Mercury built an over-the-top performer with underwhelming traction in the market. It was too wild for the olds, too big for the youths, and too in-between for anyone to really commit. On paper, Mercury's Cyclone spoiler looked like it was born for Daytona. In person, it was trapped between glory and identity crisis. It wasn't just fast, it was confused. And in a muscle car era that rewarded attitude and authenticity, that confusion proved fatal. The Cyclone spoiler faded into obscurity, becoming a misunderstood icon, praised by collectors decades later, but ignored by buyers when it mattered most. But if you think this big block bruiser lacked bite, wait until you see what Chevrolet did next. Because up next is a bow tie badge with legendary power numbers and zero muscle to back it up. Top 2. 1970 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS 454. SS 454. Those 6 characters alone could make a grown gearhead's knees buckle. It sounded like a promise, a license to destroy tires, crush quarter miles, and dominate the streets with brute force. The name conjured visions of roaring engines, smoking rubber, and wide-eyed passengers gripping the dash for dear life. So when people saw SS 454 on the fender of the brand new 1970 Chevrolet Monte Carlo, expectations weren't just high, they were sky high. This had to be the one. A muscle-bound rocket in a tailored suit. Or so they thought. Let's go back to 1970, when Chevrolet launched the Monte Carlo as its answer to the growing personal luxury car segment. It was meant to rival the Pontiac Grand Prix and Ford Thunderbird, long, elegant, and refined, a cruiser for grown-ups. But Chevy didn't want to alienate the muscle crowd. They still wanted to offer something that could flex its V8 muscles when the light turned green, so they introduced the SS 454 package, a $420 0-cents option that, on paper, turned this luxury coupe into a full-fledged street weapon. And the specs were impressive. A massive 454 cubic inch LS5 V8, pumping out 360 horsepower, turbo hydromatic 400 transmission, F41 heavy-duty sports suspension, power front disc brakes, dual exhaust system, rally wheels, SS 454, badging that proudly let the world know you weren't driving just any Monte Carlo. The visual package was just as aggressive. A bulging cowl induction hood, blacked out grille, bold chrome. The Monte Carlo's extra long hood and crisp body lines gave it a commanding presence. It looked like a Chevelle SS that had gone off to finishing school and returned with better manners and a wardrobe full of Armani. The message was clear. This car offered the best of both worlds. Power and poise, muscle and manners. Or so the brochure claimed. But fire it up and hit the gas, and you'd discover something unexpected. That big LS5 engine, still impressive, still torquey, but hampered by nearly 4,000 pounds of curb weight. The Monte Carlo SS 454 was a heavyweight, and no amount of marketing spin could hide it. It moved with dignity, not urgency. The ride was soft, engineered more for floating down the highway than tearing up back roads. The steering was numb and over-assisted. Road feel was minimal, muffled by layers of sound insulation and luxury appointments. Even the throttle response felt delayed, like the car was asking for permission before unleashing its fury. This wasn't a Chevelle SS in disguise. It was something else entirely. Yes, the Monte Carlo had the engine. Yes, it could go fast in a straight line. But it didn't feel like a muscle car. It felt like a grand tourer that had gotten a gym membership and never used it. Performance numbers told the same story. 0-60 PF in around 7 seconds. Quarter-mile times in the high 14s. Respectable, sure, but nowhere near the neck-snapping punch you'd expect from a 454 badge. The result? Confusion. Muscle car fans who were drawn in by the SS lettering were left cold. It didn't have the raw, rowdy feel of a Camaro Z/28 or Chevelle SS 396. It was too polished, too restrained. Luxury buyers, on the other hand, weren't thrilled either. To them, the SS 454 package made the car too loud, too aggressive, and too thirsty for their tastes. So the Monte Carlo SS 454 ended up stranded in the middle. Too soft for the speed freaks, too brash for the luxury crowd. Only about 3,823 units were ever produced that year, and just like that, the car meant to bridge two worlds didn't fully satisfy either. It had the looks, it had the engine, but when the road called for action, the Monte Carlo SS 464 held back. And that hesitation, that unwillingness to fully commit to muscle or luxury, cost it a place among the legends. It never earned the street cred of its Chevelle cousin, and it didn't become a staple of the performance scene. Instead, it became a curiosity, a beautiful might-have-been. But while Chevrolet played it safe, Buick decided to go all in. Coming up next, a muscle car with world-class torque, asphalt-shredding acceleration, and a fate that still makes enthusiasts shake their heads. Top 1, 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1. From a distance, it looked like it could bench press a Chevelle. Massive dual hood scoops jutted from the long nose-like intake funnels on a fighter jet. Saturn yellow paint so loud it could wake neighbors without the engine running. Black stripes so thick and aggressive, they made stop signs look subtle. The 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1 didn't ask for attention, it seized it. It didn't blend in at the car meet, it dominated it. You saw it and thought, what is that? And the answer was simple. A muscle-bound Buick. Words most people never expected to hear in the same sentence. But this wasn't some badge-engineered GTO knockoff. This wasn't a Buick trying to look tough. It was tough. Under the hood sat one of the greatest unsung engines of the golden muscle car era, the Buick 455 Stage 1 V8. But this wasn't just about cubic inches. It was about what Buick did with them. This mill was hand-built for war. 360 horsepower underrated. 510 pound-feet of torque, yes, more than a 426 Hemi. High lift camshaft. Big port cylinder heads. A Rochester quadrajet carburetor the size of a dinner plate. Free-flowing dual exhaust that barked with authority. On the street it was terrifying. In a good way. 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds, quarter-mile times in the low 13s. This thing could gap 442s, surprise Hemis, and make small buy Camaros look like toys. It had torque for days, the kind of power that slammed you back into your seat and didn't let go until you lifted. And it wasn't just fast in a straight line. Buick equipped the GSX with the F41 Rally Ride Control Package, which meant you got front and rear anti-roll bars, stiffer shocks, and heavy-duty springs. Unlike other big block bruisers, the GSX could actually handle. Plus, it came with the rugged TH400 automatic transmission, paired to a 3.42 positraction rear end. It was a powertrain combo that could take a beating and keep begging for more. Inside, it was still a Buick. Plush, quiet, comfortable. Optional A/C, full rally gauges, padded dash, tilt wheel, and soft, supportive seats. You could destroy a quarter-mile in the morning and cruise to dinner in style that same night. It was muscle and manners. A street fighter in a tuxedo. But all that brilliance came at a cost. Literally. A fully optioned GSX Stage 1 could push past $4,500. More than a GTO Judge, more than a Chevelle SS 396, and within spitting distance of a Corvette. It was an expensive gamble in a market where buyers still measured value by horsepower per dollar. And then came the badge. Buick. Not Chevy, not Pontiac, not Dodge. Buick. That single word was both its greatest irony and its biggest curse. Buick had built its brand on quiet dignity and understated power. Doctors, lawyers, and middle-aged professionals bought Buicks, not kids in jean jackets and burnout marks on their driveway. So when the GSX hit the showroom floor, the reaction was confusion. Performance fans said, "A Buick? Seriously?" Luxury buyers said, "This is too loud, too wild, too yellow." Dealerships didn't know how to market it. Should they put it next to the Riviera or next to the GTO? Should the sales pitch focus on its blistering torque or its soft vinyl seats? Even Buick's marketing division couldn't decide. The GSX ads were flashy but vague. They boasted performance but didn't fully commit to muscle culture. And in a market that thrived on identity, the GSX didn't know who it was supposed to be. Despite rave reviews from Car and Driver, Motor Trend, and Hot Rod, the sales told a different story. Buick only sold 678 GSX units in 1970, 678, in the middle of a muscle car boom. It was a world-class performer trapped in a brand that muscle car buyers didn't trust. The 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1 should have been legendary in its time. It had the looks, it had the bite, it had numbers that could embarrass icons, but it didn't have the audience. It wasn't the car people expected from Buick, and by the time people realized what it truly was, the muscle car era was already running on fumes. Rising insurance, emissions laws, and fuel concerns were closing the book. The GSX was a monster hiding in plain sight, a thunderclap no one heard until it had already faded. And just like that, Buick's one true muscle masterpiece became a collector's gem, not a street legend. The year 1970 was full of promise, power, and perfect lines. These 5 muscle cars had the looks that turned heads at every stoplight, but good looks weren't enough. Whether it was mismatched marketing, bloated curb weights, or simply arriving at the wrong cultural moment, they failed to hit the mark. Today, they're rare, misunderstood, and sometimes even collectible. But make no mistake, they flopped. And that's what makes them fascinating. Which of these flops would you take for a weekend drive anyway? Let us know in the comments. See you in the next episode of Top 5 Classic Cars.